I'm thrilled to introduce Vicky Cerdeira, the brilliant mind behind Monster Science, Create Your Own Genetic Masterpiece. Vicky is not only a children's author, but also a real life scientist and educator who has spent over a decade in research studying everything from wine bacteria to the nervous system of the transparent worm. Through her fun science books, Vicky is on a mission to make science fun, inclusive, and accessible to every child, providing that learning can be a fun and engaging experience. Her latest science comic book adventure combines genetics, human and creative, to spark curiosity and empower young readers to see themselves as future scientists. In case you don't know me, I'm JoAnn Dickinson. If you are new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button below and stay tuned until the very end. Vicky is going to tell us about her Monster Science book. Welcome, Vicky.
Hi, JoAnn. Thank you so much for having me today.
I know that it's been a while now, but I think it's so fun to share with our listeners that you and I met. I started a while back a STEM Facebook group, and STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. Sometimes STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math. Activity for kids, learning, printables, and more. So that's been fun to get to know each other on that, right, Vicky?
That was a crazy experience. Me, I didn't even know, I was posting in different groups. I just wanted to share my passion. I wanted to share science. And then the fact that I reached out and you were like, "Oh yeah, but I know who you are." And so then we started talking. So it was like a very fun and interesting coincidence indeed.
It was. Let's hop into the questions, Vicky, because we've got some great ones and I can't wait to hear more information from you.
Yeah.
Monster Science is such a fun concept. What inspired you to take genetics, a topic that can feel very intimidating, and turn it into an adventure about building a pet monster?
I love that question. And what is very interesting about genetics, and I think any science concept, is that most of them are kind of complex to understand. And I started realizing, especially with my experiences in different high schools and primary schools, that we could actually explain science in a way that it was accessible, right? Because at the end of the day, science is all around us. So I started thinking, what can I do to explain something that we can't really visually see? Because even us as scientists, DNA and genes and everything related to that, we cannot actually see it under the microscope. We actually need advanced machines to be able to see the DNA as such. So even for me as a, college student, I was like, how can I imagine this? How can I think about this? And that's when I started just drawing things in my notes of how do I really represent genes? And this is where, talking with a lot of children, I started realizing that, well, genes can also be described just as building blocks, right?
Oh.
Because at the end of the day, our building blocks are basically what make us who we are, right? So, for example, I have brown eyes. So I have a building block of brown eyes. I have brown hair. So my building block of hair is brown hair, right? So we're all made of building blocks. And so if we think about it that way, something so advanced as DNA and genetics becomes rather easy to explain if we think about it that way. And of course, the initial thought was, well, what else would a kid want than actually be able to build a monster that they can play with? Right? I mean, who didn't want a monster when they were a child? I think I did. So
I
I
think
think
I did. That'd be fun.
exactly. We all wanted a monster to play with. So I think that the important thing as well is also because kids at that age, especially, 6 and 10, they're still trying to discover who they are and what they are. And so it's really difficult to bring that explanation to themselves. And so it's actually easier to put it into something else. And that something else is just, well, let's build a monster, right?
That is so fun. I love the whole concept of how you explain something so complicated, but so simple as well, and bringing it to the kids' level so they understand. When you're in front of kids, it's like the light bulb must go on and say, oh, Now I get it.
That's the most important part for me. And I even actually had adults in my classes, so the adults that were actually the teachers of certain classes, that they would
Mm.
come to me after the class and say, I had never thought of it this way. And so I think that it's just a thing of how we see science, how we approach science. And, sometimes we might not have the time, especially if we have a class of 30 kids or we're busy parents or we're homeschooling, so we don't really have the time to delve into that curiosity, but it
Mhm.
is a journey that if we actually feed that curiosity, it can go so far.
I love that, Vicky. You have a background as a scientist and a teacher. How do those experiences shape the way you write children's books about science or even in the classroom? How do both of those combined? One sounds so complicated, and the other ones you have to teach the kids about that.
I have a long life in science, let's say. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I've been in science research for over a decade. And I
Wow.
did actual, and I always say real science. So I was in a lab, with a microscope and with projects. I worked with bacteria in wine, and I also worked in the development of the nervous system in worms. And
Mm.
so I've done everything that could be called complex. But during all of this time, I've also been very socially involved and I was also teaching. So I
Mm.
started realizing that I was adapting to students. So I was starting to realize that I'm not the classical scientist that talks about jargon all the time. And then you talk about science and what are you saying? I didn't understand three-quarters of the thing you said. And so I started doing all of the things more hands on. So let's talk about what we can do with our hands. And when you start
Mm.
talking about doing things with your hands, then you start using things that we normally have at home, right? And one classic example is we have building blocks at home. And so if you can assemble a castle with those building blocks, what stops you from assembling something else? And that is where imagination comes in. Now, of course, there is no science real method to create a monster yet, but all of the things that I talk about the book, anything related to cloning or modifying genes is actually something that we do in the labs. And it's
Wow.
something that is really complex to explain, especially for people that are already scientists. It's really complex to explain. But if we can manage to make something that is tangible, something that kids know what they're doing or they have the knowledge of that object, that is when the explanation becomes much more attainable for them because they know what a building block looks like. And so if they know that, then you're like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. If I can build a castle and I put green walls, then I put a green block. And if I put a
Mm.
yellow door, then it's a yellow block. And that applies immediately to who we are and what we look like.
That is so interesting.
My boyfriend, he has a son, so I kind of also use him.
Okay.
He's 14.
Mm.
But I use all of these experiences. So I'm surrounded by a lot of kids. I'm the auntie of every single one of my friends. I have enough kids for I don't need kids for myself. But yes, I've been always providing education in a way that is different to the system. So
Mhm.
although I agree with a lot of the things of the system, I also disagree with a lot of them. And
Mhm.
me as a self-diagnosed, not really diagnosed neurodivergent, I think that there is a huge aspect and a huge lack in the educational system that doesn't take into account the neurodivergent kids and our curiosity and our passion for things. And this is where I started realizing when I was teaching in two classes, special education classes with kids with autism, that I started realizing that's where also we're adapting the system. The system needs
Mhm.
to change. And this is where I started learning what are the other things that I can add to my teaching that actually makes it accessible for everyone, whether neurotypical, neurodivergent, neurospicy, whatever it is that you want to call it. This is where education comes in. And this is where we're supposed to make education inclusive and accessible for everyone, independently of who you are.
It sounds so complicated, but yet you really break it down. And I love that about everything you do on social media. That's why I wanted to interview you because I knew this would be so fun to understand the whole concept of it. Making science fun for kids is something you're passionate about. I can tell you're very passionate, Vicky. What are some of the strategies or approaches you found really work to keep young learners engaged? So how do you get them engaged to have fun?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And what is interesting is that we don't talk a lot about it, but we do it like almost by instinct, right? So I
Mm.
always say we are born being scientists, right? So a baby when it's born, they're going to, put something in their mouth. They're going to, grab sand and then put it in their mouth because they have no idea what they're doing. And basically, what they're doing is thinking and processing. Okay, where am I? What am I doing? Is this edible? Is this not edible? Is it good? Is it not good? What do I feel? Is it soft? Is it rough? So that is literally critical thinking. That is being a scientist. And so for me, the process of how to make it engaging, it's actually make them touch. And everything goes through
Mm.
the hands-on experience. Me, every time I teach, I've never used a science textbook. I've actually made them. I've had, for example, my last class with the special kids. I actually made them build a plant cell, and that is an advanced concept for a 12-year-old. A plant cell with Play-Doh. So why? Because textbook, I'm not gonna teach them. Oh yeah, look, the chloroplast and the chlorophyll. No, they're not gonna remember any of that. The important thing is, hey, you know how it looks like because you've touched it. You've built it with your hands. And at the end of the day, the second thing that is also very important is what is called the Socrates approach. The Socrates approach is literally answering questions with questions. So instead of having a student or a kid or your kids come and say, my mom, why is the sky blue? Instead of saying, well, the sky is blue because, and then proceed to give the explanation, you would actually ask, do you think the sky is blue? And
Hmm.
so, of course, the kid is going to be taken aback because what do you mean? And so they're going to continue asking other questions. And then you're going to build up on other questions. And so that's going to build the critical thinking of the kids in the way that they are going to look for the answers instead of coming to you to look for the answers.
Mm.
And that is how critical thinking develops. And when you have kids that come to you and say, Mim, but miss, do we have, the sky is blue, or do we have, I don't know, moons in Saturn? Well, I don't know. Could we have moons in Saturn? Well, yes, but, well, do we? I don't know. Maybe look for information. And if you're not sure, then we can discuss it. And so it also gives them the independence of the critical thinking and not the, relying on someone to give them the answer. So that's how it becomes engaging. It's not a lecture. It's actually a conversation.
Your kids must love your class. I have to ask about what you built with the Play Doh because I know it sounds easy to you and how you did it, but what did their projects turn out to look like? What did they look like after they used that Play Doh?
That was actually very interesting because, as I was telling you, in this class in particular, I had 8 kids, and we're talking about in different parts of the autism spectrum. So I had 8 kids from 10 to 12. The first couple of kids who were most in the autism spectrum, I have a kid that couldn't even read or write yet. He was
Wow.
12, but he couldn't read or write yet. And on the whole opposite of the spectrum, I had a high potential kid who was very capable, but he
Mm.
had emotional issues. And this is where the autism spectrum was very obvious, right? So I had to adapt the project to be for each one of the kids to be able to do
Wow.
something at their level. And so this experiment started, or this project started, because we started talking about, can plants grow without soil? That was
Mm.
my initial question. And of course, all of the kids were like, no, really. And why can't they grow without soil? Well, because soil provides nutrients. Okay, but what if we add water with nutrients? Would it grow? And that's when, the kids stopped. We're like, I don't know. Well, okay. So then let's talk about what is a plant, right? And so we started talking, okay, what is a plant? Well, a plant is an organism that requires what? It requires water, it requires sunlight, and it requires nutrients. But we also need to understand what the plant is made of. And this is where the cells come in. Now, of course, I didn't go into the complex details of what each part of the cell does, but they do have an idea that there is a machinery in the cell that is
Mm.
needed for the plant to be able to eat, to sleep, and to breathe, which is exactly what we do, which is what we are as humans. We are a machinery. So when they have the plant cell, which of course I gave them some guidelines, but then I gave them, the classical plant cell image or diagram that we usually see, and they had to reproduce that in Play-Doh And so once we had that in Play-Doh, now we know what is a plant, what it needs, and what it looks like, and what it is made of. And so from then, the question started arising. Well, if a plant can, it can actually grow without soil, does that mean that plants can grow on the moon? I'm like, that's a great question.
Mhm.
What if we test that out? How would we test that out? And so, of course, then the questions were like, well, we would have to try to grow a plant without soil. And I'm like, exactly. And how do we do that? Well, we would need lights. Okay, but if we don't have sun, what can we use as light? We can use a light bulb. Exactly, we can use a light bulb.
Mm.
But how do we know if the light bulb is effective? Because, well, there can be also different lights. We can have yellow light, we can have blue light, we can have red light. So we can try bulbs of the different colors. I'm like, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a whole process. And at the end, actually, the kids managed to grow in little mason jars, the little beans, the white beans. They actually managed to grow in different mason jars without soil. And they realized that, and they measured the growth of the plant for each one of the different lights and realized that there are several lights that are better than others, and that actually plants can also grow without light. They're going to look
Um,
different, but they can grow without light.
I bet they had fun with that project. Really got them thinking and opening up their mind. And what I find interesting, Vicky, is from one learning spectrum to the other, and you've got to find ways to bring them together and help all of them understand. And do you find that some kids help others?
They actually help each other. Of the teachers that were there as well, that know them more than I know them, they would also foster this kind of teamwork. And so they would
Mm.
tell me, this person works better with this one. Try to avoid mixing these two because they're problematic. So especially because they are special kids, you also have to kind of try to adapt as much as possible. And also, what is their level of comfort? Because now we're also talking
Mm.
about kids with special needs. We're talking about also taking into account other needs apart from
Sure.
the academic ones, let's say. It was really interesting. And honestly, at the end of the project, because they actually presented their project in an event, they were
Oh,
actually talking about the project. I was crying of pride. It was very emotional. But the thing that shocked me the most was that at the end of that year of project, I was having 12-year-old kids asking me all the way until about religion and the creation of earth. And I was like,
oh my.
what? Because it opened their mind to ask questions. And sometimes I even didn't even have the answers for their questions. And I was like, honestly, I don't
Wow.
know. And even maybe science doesn't even know at this point. But it is a
Wow.
question that is interesting and we are exploring it, but I don't have an answer for you right now.
How interesting that you opened enough of their mind to keep thinking. Talk about critical thinking and opening what I would call the floodgates of really getting them to start thinking beyond what even science knows. How wonderful. In Monster Science, kids solve puzzles to learn about genetics. Why do you think hands on activities and interactive storytelling are so powerful with learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's kind of related to what we've been discussing. The important thing here is how we are teaching science, right? So we have, I've done a career in science, okay? I've had textbooks big like that I've had to eat to be able to learn everything. And yes, of course, if we're talking about a university diploma or university degree, of course, we need advanced text and we need advanced knowledge. Now, we cannot give a science textbook to a 6-year-old and pretend for them to like science when that's the only thing that they're exposed to. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, in a lot of countries or in a lot of situations, for example, here in Canada, there it gets to the point in high school or secondary school that they can actually choose not to do science. And unfortunately, most of the times they choose to not do science. And it is kind of understandable because if you're going to be stuck, with a textbook trying to read a chapter where 3/4 of the text is not understandable and it's not visually engaging, then what's the point?
How boring.
Exactly.
I have to ask you, Vicky, when you were going through college, did you ever feel that? How come this professor can't make it more interesting?
Oh my God, so many times.
Yeah.
So many times. But you know what? And you know, this is what I found very interesting because in the same percentage of that I got teachers that I was like, my God, I could have just read the slides from my house and
Mhm.
not come to the class. I also had teachers who were the complete opposite. And I had
Oh.
teachers like my genetics engineering teacher on the first genetics engineering that I did, that he explained things with such a passion that I was like, this
Mm.
is what I'm talking about. This is the teacher that I want to be.
I love
So
that.
it kind of balanced each other out. But there are, unfortunately, of course, scientists who are known to not be very, in the communication science aspect of it. And then there's a lot of other scientists like me who were like, no, science is supposed to be for let's talk about education. Let's talk about educating with science.
You've said that science is all around us. That statement really got me thinking today, especially when I was on the STEM group. It's all around us in our daily life. How do you
Mhm.
encourage children and maybe even parents to see themselves as scientists in every moment?
I would actually dare you, and I'm going to use the Socrates approach with you as well, if we're talking about it. Yeah. So the thing here is instead of thinking about what are things made up of, because that's a, let's say, complex question, or basically it has a complex answer. My question for you is when you're cooking, what do you do when you cook? You're baking a cake. What do you do to bake a cake?
You've gathered those ingredients,
Mhm,
you measure them, you put some dry ingredients with wet ingredients,
mhm.
you mix all of that, and then you put it in a pan and you bake it.
So that sounds pretty similar to do what?
Oh my gosh, is that a trick question?
It's not, because actually that looks really similar to just doing an experiment. Because we gather our ingredients, we gather our material, we measure the things that we need to measure, we combine them whenever it's needed, we combine them, and we quote unquote cook them if needed, or we put it in certain machines if needed, or we freeze them if needed. So when you're cooking, you're literally doing an experiment, literally.
I never thought about that. See, there you go. There's science is all around
And
us. I have this light ring that's in front of me, and you plug it into the wall, and there's electricity there. So then that would prompt a question, I would think. How did that work? Where did that come from? What's going on inside that wall to bring that circuit out and light that ring?
yeah, or even and sometimes it's funny because I talk with a lot of parents, right? And you know that there's always the comments when the toddler gets to the, 3 or 4 year stage where they're asking the why questions all the time and the
Yeah.
parents are like, "Oh, I cannot shut them up." And literally, that is the moment where you start realizing the curiosity, where you're like, I mean, yeah, maybe some questions are just, but why, but why, but why? Okay, like at some point you have no more arguments, okay? But that's where the why is born. Because now we're
Mm.
no longer doing it without words. Now we're putting it actually into words. And so if you have a toddler who is asking you the whys, at the end of the day, scientists were just toddlers with the why. But okay, but why? But like how? But this doesn't make sense. But how? And at the end of the day, that's being a scientist. And that's also just being a human being in our society nowadays.
Yeah.
We should, unfortunately, we don't as society, we don't as much, but we should be asking the whys and the hows and actually have that critical thinking. That would save a lot of trouble, society.
That would be great to try that at a school visit when you're talking about publishing, when you're talking about
Mhm.
illustrations, when you're talking about writing and critical thinking of how that story is going to go. But why would I do that? Is that going to make something easier if I start questioning it? And where else can I go?
The important thing I think is, for example, what I do, because we didn't mention it yet, but I do science animation birthday parties for kids.
Oh,
I do. So we do experiments, so it's super fun. And what I do is actually I don't do the show. The show is not for me. I know how the experiments work. So basically, I come with the materials, and each kid does, they do the hands-on experience
Oh my
of the
gosh.
experiments, right? I have a lot of kids that are going to ask me, but why? But how? Is it going to explode? What is this? I'm like, well, I don't know. You tell me. Like, touch it. What does it feel like? Or smell it. Do you smell something? Or, taste it. Does it, do you feel something? Is it salt or maybe is it sugar? And I don't answer
Mm.
any of their questions. I just let them create their own hypothesis. Then
Mm.
we do the experiment and then we see. And then my question is, so were you right or were you wrong? Did it work like you thought it was going to work or not? And I am just guiding them.
I love that. I love the idea of the science birthday party.
Mm.
You're also committed to making science inclusive and diverse. What gaps do you see in children's literature when it comes to representing in STEM, and how your books helping to fill that need?
I love that question. And honestly, and I'm almost saddened to say that there is such a big gap, honestly. And I'm talking about children literature, but I am also talking about the science environment and the science research environment. So, unfortunately, regarding children literature, we have a lot of books, which, of course, and I'm going to be clear, these are very needed. But most of the times, when we're talking about kids who are quote unquote different, so we're talking, either they are not physically able or, they are from other ethnicities, that we're talking about what makes them different. So we're talking about, oh, if the kid is not physically able, then the book is going to be about why is he missing a leg or why are they using a wheelchair, which the books are extremely needed. However, we don't have books where these kids or any kid is actually just a character and a main character of an adventure book, of
Mm.
just being a protagonist of a story without having to highlight their differences, without
Mm.
having to highlight, oh, this is what makes me different. It's just kids being kids and exploring and asking questions and having fun. It's just that. It's just that. And unfortunately, most of the times, for the science literature in particular, we have advanced textbooks, or we have, especially for kids, so the curiosity books, the science fact or the Guinness records kind of style books. And then there's really not a lot. Now we're having a little bit, it's kind of moving around, but just having experiences or adventures with science without it having to be a harsh teaching you science kind of book. Every time I would have, and I would give classes in Argentina to underprivileged schools and to special education, most of the times kids would come and ask me like, but can I actually be a scientist? And my question, and that
Mm.
would break my heart
Oh
because
my
I would be like,
gosh.
of course you can be a scientist. And I started realizing that that's because they can't see themselves. If they look what a scientist looks like, they're just not going to find themselves there. And that is very sad because anyone can be you, as I said before, you aren't born a scientist, you are already a scientist. So if you
Mm.
want to pursue a science career, this is your space. You're supposed to have that space.
Sometimes it's the lack of confidence in themselves. Maybe they're not good readers. Maybe they just think that you've got to be so much smarter. Science is much more simple than what a lot of people make it.
I think that and one thing that I always say when I get the, oh, but you must be so intelligent. I am a scientist who hates math. Like math is a torture for me. I've cried in every single math class I had
Oh,
since I was in primary school. I hate math. I'm a scientist. I've been in research for 10 years now. So the problem of us, and I'm going to include myself, this imposter syndrome or trust that I'm not intelligent enough to be in science. It's unfortunately based on how we see the system and how
wow.
elitist the system has become. And this is where I just can't stand being in a system where I'm just promoting that elitism. And that is also
Mhm.
why I aparted myself or got myself out of the research environment and actually tried to do something not that necessarily goes against it, but that I can actually open doors for communities.
I think it's that opening doors and helping the kids see themselves as, maybe I can do this. Look how simple this is. Science is just sounds so complicated in itself. Science can go in 100 different directions. Nervous system for a worm. Who would have ever thought that? My daughter's sister-in-law is a scientist. She does a lot of research with science and technology. There's just such a broad spectrum. And I love that you're opening that door for every kid that thinks that they can't be a scientist. Looking ahead, what exciting projects or science adventures can young readers expect from you and your next project? I think you mentioned one of them, Vicky, of the type of books that are needed out there. That really got me thinking. It would be a great story, a couple characters, and different situations they're brought into, and they ask, why is it this and why is it that? And showing them critical thinking.
Definitely. And honestly, I have so many ideas. I mean, we can talk for hours of all of the ideas that I have. But I think that the most important thing for me is, well, first of all, because I am a new author and well, a self-published author, which also doesn't really help about, money and investment into it. Just first, I would just really like to, of course, see how this is taken by the communities, how this is taken by the kids, by the
Mhm.
educators, by the parents. And then potentially also be able to actually build onto each other. For example, we're talking about DNA on the first book. Then what if the next book is about cells, which is how we're taught science? We
Oh,
talk about from the all the way to the biggest thing. What if they can build onto each other so that there is actually a curriculum based book or series
mhm.
of books where you're like, okay, if you want to make this fun and you're teaching about cells, then you can use this book. Or if you're teaching about DNA and heredity, then you can choose this
Oh,
and like that.
you could have different subjects of that they can use in the classroom, and it might
Mhm.
even help them with all the research that they wouldn't need to do. They've got a handbook right there that brings it to the students level. I love that, Vicky. As we know, as self-published authors, the finance side of it, it's a tough business. It's not for the faint at heart. Either you do Kickstarters, you do different ways to raise money. There's so many different challenges that you can run into. If anybody out there has any questions between Vicky and I, we would be more than happy to help with the experience of publishing. You have now published a book and you got over all those hurdles. You just find different ways to publish those books that are our dreams to pass on to the kids.
I think that honestly, for anyone listening to this as well, contacts and people. And, I spoke with JoAnn for some time before as well, just saying like, please help me. I have no idea what I'm doing. Talking with people. And I think that was a very big thing for me. So I think that that's a very big part of it. And who knows, maybe you end up having another podcast with another author like I had with JoAnn.
That's what's so fun about these podcasts, Vicky, is we chat on social media, we're texting, but it's nothing like this one-on-one. Vicky and I have had the pleasure of talking with one another prior to doing any podcast. I urge all of our author friends to get together, hop on a Zoom call, just calling our author friends and saying, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? Maybe it's my age, Vicky, that I like to talk one on one.
Love talking. So, hey, I prefer talking over text. I think it's just talking and of course taking into account that everybody is busy and we
Yes.
have to deal with our own thing. But I think that it's always helpful and it also gives you different points of view. Some people say, oh, I did this for marketing, but then other people say, oh, this didn't work for me. Or what do I do? If one says, and as a scientist, I'm like, okay, but if one says yes and two other three say no, and then another one, but statistically it doesn't work. So which one do I choose?
Vicky, I saw a video of you opening your new book. I want to see it. Open it so we can see what's inside. I was so impressed with the layout, the colors. It looks like a fantastic book. Oh, I love that.
Spoil the book. I'm not going to give you the most important things, but I'm going to show you if we can see it. There we
Oh,
go.
I love that. Speaking of marketing, what are your plans with that? Are you going to take it to your schools and share it with the teachers? Are you going to go to a farmer's market? Or do you have the opportunity to do school visits? I'm curious to see what you're going to do with your new book.
Honestly, I have so many things going on, especially this week. So September 25 is the official launch date. So in 2 days. I It's not out yet, but it will be out in 2 days. I had a podcast yesterday with another author. I have your podcast here with you. I'm actually also launching book launch events here in Montreal in a bookstore
Ooh.
as well. I was actually very lucky to also be in touch with media. So I'm going to actually be on TV on Thursday, which is
Oh
the
my.
first of my life. I have no idea what is going to happen. So I'm going to be in Global News Montreal on Thursday morning. And then I actually have 3 vendor events already confirmed here in Canada. So the first one is coming up now, so the 5th of October, because it is Latin American Heritage Month, between the end of September and the beginning of October. I actually have a heritage event, a Latino heritage event, on the 5th of October in Quebec City, where I'm gonna be presenting the Spanish book because we didn't talk about that. But the book is in 3 languages, in English, Spanish, and in French. Because, well, I'm in Montreal, which is a francophone province. So, of course, French, English, because, well, English, and then Spanish to honor my mother language, my mother tongue. So the first vendor event is for the Spanish book. Then the second vendor event is in November 9 and is here in Montreal. And it's actually promoting the Quebec businesses. So it's going to be more like a Black Friday for Quebec industries or companies. And then I have the last one, which is in December, and it's a 3-day vendor event. So I'm going to be exhausted. And it's, of course, a vendor event for Christmas. So I don't know. We'll see. That one is the biggest one that I've planned yet. So we'll see.
That is fantastic. I love that you're doing so many events, so many ethnic events. You have that opportunity. I don't feel like I have that
Mhm.
great of an opportunity with that, but I love the 3-day. They are exhausting, Vicky. I won't lie to you. I mean, I've done an 8-hour event before and it's
Oh my God.
so tiring.
Yeah.
The 3-day event, is it all day or is it just for like 4 hours?
So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the Friday starts in the afternoon, so it's like from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. But then Saturday and Sunday, it's the whole day from
Oh
like
my.
9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And you talk to so many people. I love events because you have so much opportunity and just the subject matter of your book. They're going to ask you why, how, what do you know? What an opportunity those people are going to have. They don't even know yet what a great opportunity they're going to have to talk to an actual scientist. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
all those events.
I'm super excited. I mean, I'm overwhelmed, but I'm super excited.
Is there anything else that I missed that you want to share with the listener out there about your book?
So, as I mentioned, we have the 3 books in the 3 languages. And another little detail that I hadn't mentioned before,
Ooh.
but I'll just mention it now. In the Amazon, where you're going to be able to find the books, you're also going to be able to find actually an ebook of a manual of 10 experiments that you can do at home that are super easy to do with material that you can find at home. And it's actually related to Maya and Jordan, which are the main characters of the Monster Science book. And it's basically the top 10 classified science experiments that Maya and Jordan needed to learn before becoming monster scientists. So that is available on the 25th of September as well as an ebook so that you can print it and use it at home or whatever it is that you want to maybe potentially share it with educators as well. Instead of having to buy a book, you can actually buy as an ebook, which is cheaper. And then you can basically share it or print it if you need.
I love that idea, Vicky, an ebook with 10 different science experiments.
The materials, the protocol, of course, the instruction, and then you're also going to have the science behind the experiment so that you
Oh,
can also understand what is happening.
oh, what an original marketing idea. That's terrific. Well, Vicky, as always, we could sit here and talk for hours. I have so many other questions. We're going to have you come back when you have
Whatever.
more books or maybe after your holiday and all those events. I'd love for you to share how those events turned out and what you learned from it. That would be a
Yeah,
great podcast too,
I love
with
that.
you being a newer author. And you are diving in with both feet, with learning very quickly what those events are about. A perfect time of year too, through the fall and the holidays.
Christmas and New Year's is gonna be like, oh my God, I'm dead.
Share with our listeners where they can find you, Vicky, and where they can find your books.
So you can find me in 3 different places. So on Facebook, you can find me as Fun Sci. So as if it were fun science without the ions at the end. So Fun Sci. On Instagram, as Fun Sci Books. And then I also have the website, which is funscibooks.com. The benefit of the website is that you can find free resources on the website.
That is wonderful. We're going to have you back because you are so knowledgeable and so informative. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for joining Beyond the Book with JoAnn Dickinson.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.